Hello everyone. Something tells me that this video is going to please a lot of people because it's been a very long time since I've been asked for a video on Spinoza. For several months, maybe even several years, I've been told, but when are you going to make a video on Spinoza? So I took my time. I postponed as much as possible because Spinoza is a monument of philosophy, and one does not tackle a monument of this magnitude without being a little prepared. I hope this video will meet your expectations. Spinoza is among those authors who are quite challenging to approach, primarily because his philosophical system aims to encompass totality. In other words, Spinoza's philosophical ambition is nothing less than to explain God or nature, as he sees these two as synonymous, representing the entirety of all that exists. Addressing such totality in a YouTube video is naturally delicate, so this video will serve as an introduction to Spinoza's thought, rather than an exhaustive account of his philosophy. Now, to give some biographical context, Spinoza was a remarkable figure, a 17th century Jewish philosopher from Portugal who migrated to the Netherlands. He was a controversial figure for his views on religion and was excommunicated by the Jewish community. He even faced an assassination attempt, and notably, he kept the coat pierced by the would-be assassin's dagger for the rest of his life. His principal work, Ethics, was published posthumously in 1677, 2 years after his death, as he was well aware of the potential dangers his work could provoke during his lifetime. Spinoza was a bold philosopher, unafraid to cut to the heart of matters, and his philosophical positions were revolutionary for his time. But before delving into the specifics of his philosophy, it's essential to set the stage. Spinoza is known as a principal opponent of Descartes, though it's more accurate to say he didn't reject all of Cartesian philosophy. Spinoza stands in stark contrast to Descartes on a fundamental point. Where Descartes was a dualist, distinguishing sharply between matter and mind, substance and thought, Spinoza saw things not as distinctly separated. He was a precursor to what we call monism, the idea that body and mind are inseparable. Since Plato, this ontological separation between body and mind was assumed, fitting neatly into the Christian worldview of a material world here and a spiritual realm beyond. But for Spinoza, this distinction is non-existent. In his view, body and mind are simply two attributes of a single substance he calls God or nature. To better grasp this idea of monism, consider the example of cannabis. Known to alter psychic abilities and states of consciousness, cannabis, when consumed, also impacts physical capabilities. Try engaging in a physical activity like boxing or a workout after using cannabis. The experience is notably different. This example illustrates that a psychic alteration inevitably accompanies a physical one, suggesting an interplay between the spiritual and material dimensions that cannot be separated or seen as independent entities. This interaction is what led some commentators to describe Spinoza's thought as parallelism between body and mind, substance and thought. In a forthcoming video, we will revisit this distinction between body and mind. However, as I've mentioned, Spinoza's philosophy encompasses totality, and for this introductory video, I do not wish to tackle this question head-on. Instead, I aim to approach it from another angle. While most philosophers offer numerous entry points to their thoughts, Spinoza's are fewer, but I have endeavored to highlight one for today's video: Spinoza's monistic view of freedom. Contrary to Cartesian dualism and its Platonic origins, Spinoza's monism has profound practical consequences, particularly regarding his views on freedom. For Spinoza, freedom is an illusion. Before delving into why Spinoza perceived freedom as illusory, it's essential to understand why. For Descartes, freedom was a presupposition. Descartes posited that humans possess free will, an ability to choose independently of external influences. Free will, for him, was an independence of the will from the material world, deeply tied to the dualist distinction between body and mind. This is why Spinoza's monism directly challenges the notion of free will. If free will is an illusion, it implies that man, as a physical and spiritual being, falsely believes he is the author of his actions. This belief underpins most modern societies, grounding the idea of personal mastery over one's body and the consequent notion of responsibility. If we lacked free will, the concept of responsibility, and therefore justice, would be meaningless. A perpetrator could argue that his body acted independently of his will, absolving him of guilt. The absence of free will suggests that anything could be justifiable, a notion revolutionary in the strictest sense, potentially upending the very foundations of our social life. Consider if one who has betrayed, hurt, or lied to you could shield themselves with Spinozist monism, claiming no responsibility for their actions due to being entirely determined. Are we truly responsible for our thoughts and actions? Spinoza's perspective, while not viable in a juridico-political context, highlights a fundamental query. Are we truly the authors of our actions? Do we genuinely bear responsibility for our thoughts and deeds? For Spinoza, there's no fundamental difference between thought and matter. He famously said, "The order and connection of ideas are the same as the order and connection of things." This implies that our actions are merely mechanical consequences of our ideas, and vice versa. We often misconceive the relationship between thought and action, assuming that one determines the other. Spinoza challenges this notion, suggesting it's a misunderstanding of human nature and the interaction between body and spirit. Noticeably, our material conditions can influence our opinions, and as our opinions evolve, they impact our actions and material circumstances. In contrast, the Cartesian view, rooted in Christian doctrine, posits that humans, endowed with free will, choose between good and evil. Descartes held that humans alone possess free will, unlike inanimate objects or animals, leading to his theory of the animal machine. This view posits that a thrown pen, for example, lacks choice in its trajectory, being a mere result of the mechanical forces applied, just as animals, according to Descartes, lack free will. Descartes viewed animals as machines, not in the literal sense of being made of metal, but rather as beings governed by instinct without conscious will. He suggested that unlike animals, humans possess free will, being aware of their desires and not merely acting mechanically. However, Spinoza challenges this. He argues that the human perception of free will is illusory, stemming from a lack of awareness of the causal history leading to one's desires and thoughts. People might feel they're making conscious choices, like spontaneously deciding to eat a yogurt, but they're unaware of the underlying factors influencing these decisions. For Spinoza, while we may choose our actions, we do not choose the reasons that drive these choices. Our decisions rest on desires, emotions, and passions that we do not control. This distinction between Descartes' and Spinoza's views on free will and consciousness reflects deeper philosophical debates about the nature of human autonomy and decision-making. We don't choose our passions or desires. We experience them just like a pen experiences the force that propels it in a certain direction without resistance. Spinoza saw us as captives of determinism, the idea that in a physical world, everything follows the law of causality. For instance, craving yogurt could be triggered by a subconscious influence from an advertisement seen before. Take a student deciding on a college major. It seems like a free choice, but what influenced it? Perhaps a family background in science or an ingrained interest in human biology. The student believes it's a personal choice, subjectively feeling free, yet it's actually shaped by a series of causes and effects. Humans, being physical, are subject to the laws of matter. If you try to defy these laws, like attempting to fly off a balcony, physical constraints remind you of your limits. Freedom always operates within a framework of physical constraints. Trying to operate in the physical world without following its fundamental laws is like attempting to make crepes without eggs or flour. It just doesn't make sense. If you want crepes, you follow a recipe. Similarly, doing anything in the physical world means adhering to certain rules. This might seem obvious, but we often act without considering these fundamental laws. Consider the domino effect. Pushing the first domino inevitably leads to the fall of the last. Yet, in our actions, we often fail to connect our initial action with its ultimate outcome, like a fly repeatedly hitting a window pane, not realizing the window is open. This intellectual blindness prevents us from seeing the chain of causes and effects in which we're involved. Spinoza used a simple metaphor to explain this. Imagine a stone thrown to the ground. If the stone suddenly became conscious, it might think it's controlling its own movement, unaware that its trajectory was determined by external forces. Spinoza suggests that we are like that stone, subject to external influences, yet believing we are the initiators of our actions. He asserts that free will is an illusion as long as we believe we are the sole cause of our actions and thoughts, which for him are inseparable. After delving into Spinoza's philosophy, the inevitable question arises: does this mean humans are no more free than a stone or an animal, equally subject to external determinants with no real agency? Is our belief in freedom merely an illusion, a kind of prideful mistake? Not quite. It's common to interpret Spinoza as suggesting that human freedom is an illusion, no different from the instinct-driven animal or the stone's path determined by external forces. But to fully grasp Spinoza's message, one must explore the entirety of his ethics. Gilles Deleuze notes that if Spinoza named his work Ethics, it implies a belief in human choice. Ethics only makes sense for beings capable of self-determination. For Spinoza, freedom is possible. It's about understanding our determinations, recognizing the influences shaping our choices and actions. This self-awareness or reason is what differentiates us and grants access to freedom. Reason in Spinoza's view isn't just about recognizing our determinism, it's the ability to understand we are determined by influences, especially those acting on our passions. Spinoza's work, therefore, isn't just an ontology, a study of being, but an ethics, a study directed towards action. Understanding this distinction is key to appreciating his perspective on freedom and human potential. Spinoza's concept of reason is more than just the understanding that we are determined by external influences. It involves recognizing how these influences, particularly our emotions or effects, shape our actions and experiences. Our emotions, which we often experience involuntarily, significantly impact our responses to situations. For example, anxiety, a common emotion, reflects our reaction to uncertain and potentially fearful situations. If a partner is late and unreachable, anxiety may arise from not knowing their situation, leading to fears ranging from their safety to infidelity. However, this anxiety isn't necessarily rational, as it doesn't contribute to understanding the actual situation. In Spinoza's view, similar to Stoicism, passions or emotions enslave us, while reason has the power to free us. When reason confronts an emotion like anxiety, it can dissolve the passion, alleviating the associated suffering. This idea reflects a stoic influence in Spinoza's philosophy, where reason is seen as a liberating force against the tyranny of uncontrolled emotions. Some people handle potentially stressful situations with ease and calm. This ability stems from the work of reason within them, the awareness that emotional reactions won't change or improve the situation. Recognizing that emotions don't alter reality, they embrace reason, entering its temple. Reason has a sort of magical power. It reminds us that we can only influence what is within our control. When applied broadly, reason has the power to dissolve emotions and suffering. Spinoza tells us that this leads to joy, not as an emotion, but as a state of being rooted in rational understanding. Joy, in Spinoza's philosophy, means being driven by reason, which dispels all passions and emotions. When you act from this state of joy, your actions are free. While difficult to conceptualize, this idea is best understood through experience. Joyful action is conscious acceptance that things are as they are, leading to intense joy and awareness of our power to act, think, and be. Freedom in Spinoza's view isn't about escaping physical determinations. It's about understanding that everything is determined, and from this understanding we can comprehend all that is. Acting with this understanding is to act freely. Freedom is tied to reason, the power to comprehend reality. Accepting immutable facts like 2 + 2 = 4 isn't painful or sacrificial. It's a natural, unburdened acceptance. Accepting rational truths like 2 + 2 = 4 doesn't diminish who we are. It doesn't affect our pride or self-esteem and doesn't impact our emotions. This acceptance is more liberating than clinging to irrational beliefs. For example, believing in the validity of the Pythagorean theorem or the law of gravity doesn't restrict our freedom but helps us navigate the world realistically. Accepting mortality is another aspect of embracing rationality. It's not about desiring or hastening death, but understanding it as a natural part of life. By internalizing this acceptance, we liberate ourselves from the fear of death and its related anxieties. Reason is freeing. It allows us to let go of fears and passions that prevent us from accepting reality. Being rational, in the Spinozist or Stoic sense, isn't about fatalism or resignation. It's about recognizing that everything has its reasons and causes. Understanding these causes doesn't mean opposing them, but comprehending what governs our physical world. This understanding or comprehension lightens our load and steps us towards freedom. A truly free person, through reason, transcends the influence of passions and aligns actions with rational understanding. For if you were merely a physical being, any external event could provoke in you an unchosen passion. A pen cannot alter the trajectory imposed upon it. However, you, the listener, have the power not to absorb the passions from the outside world, not to receive the emotions related to what happens to you. You are not enslaved by your passions. You have the ability to understand, to distance yourself, to lay them out before you, and grasp the principles of their formation, the process through which these passions have entered you. This power is yours, and you will notice that when you understand this process, understanding how the emotion you currently feel was born, how the anxiety formed, what is the cause of this accompanying fear that weighs you down, you'll realize that all of it is just a chain of causes and effects that you are not compelled to endure as if you were mere receptacles. You have a power, the power of reason, and it is up to you to exercise it. Thank you.